The following podcast is created and sponsored by High Beam Ministry.
The books of Bible prophecy have long been shrouded in mystery. Ancient texts, cryptic numbers, symbolic imagery, all depicting awesome apocalyptic events soon to come. Is it really possible to understand what they mean? What is the mark of the beast? Is it, as some say, a computer chip implanted under the skin, or even something more insidious? And what about the Antichrist? Has this sinister enemy of God already made his appearance? Or is he still waiting in the shadows? Will some terrorist event trigger Earth's final tribulation? Will we witness the horrors of Armageddon and the 7 last plagues? What do we need to know to avoid being left behind when the Lord returns? Will we recognize the last days and know what to expect?
Welcome to the Erzatz Coffee Shop. This is Jay, your Truth Barista, and I'm serving up a steamy cup of God's truth for the average Joe. You can catch me and this podcast on my websites, truthbarista.com, all one word, truthbarista.com, and highbeamministry.com. That's HIGHBEAM ministry.com, as in car high beam. We're shining the light of God's truth on the road ahead.
We have been talking about prophecy for, quite a few weeks in our discussions here over the cup of coffee that seems to get better every week, doesn't it?
I tell you what, man, I don't know who your supplier is, but this is getting really, really good.
I know. So last time we were talking about history and how history has clues to help unpack the future, and you went back to Daniel and you were talking about a lot of things that were happening in Daniel that will be again redone in the future. So let's pick it up from there and where we left off.
Okay, simple synopsis. Daniel says there's going to be an evil king. He's going to desecrate the temple, set up an image. He sacrificed a pig on an altar, and he stopped the daily sacrifice. That happened with Antiochus Epiphanes, the manifestation of God. Okay. Daniel says in Daniel 9, it's revealed to him it's going to happen again. Jesus on the Temple Mount, 165 years plus, or almost 200 years later, is looking back and saying, yeah, Daniel was right. The pattern that happened and the prophecy he said is going to happen at the very end. So this is what he said. He will make a firm covenant in force for 1 week. There's going to be a 7-year agreement. And in the middle of that agreement, this evil king will put a stop to sacrifice and offering, which means sacrifice and offering has to be going on the Temple Mount. And the abomination of desolation will be on a wing of the temple until the decreed destruction is poured out on the desolator. Now, exactly what it means will be put on a wing of the temple, that's we're not sure, but something that's going to desecrate the temple area will be there. And if we follow the pattern and we look ahead to the book of Revelation, it's going to be some kind of an idolatrous image to be worshipped.
Some have said, haven't they, that is the image of the beast or the Antichrist?
Right. In other words, if we follow the pattern of Antiochus saying, I'm Epiphanes, I'm the manifestation of God on earth, well, it makes perfect sense. He's going to set up an image to himself. And it says in Revelation, the false prophet, the religious leader, is going to cause people to worship the image. And by the way, that's an abomination, because God says, you shall not make for yourself an image of anything on heaven or anything on earth or under the earth and worship it.
But that has been the MO of the evil one, the deceiver, Satan, Hasatan, Lucifer. He has always wanted to be worshipped, and he has found an instrument through the false prophet and the Antichrist to be worshipped.
Yes, that has been his MO. Okay, so let's put it this way. Let's go back to what Jesus is saying. So when you see the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of by the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, this is what he says. Once you see the sign, verse 16, then those in Judea, which by the way is the area around Jerusalem, must flee to the mountains. Now, if you're fleeing to the mountains, you're probably heading east, because heading west takes you right into the Mediterranean. Okay, or you're heading out into the Judean wilderness. In other words, you're getting the heck out of Dodge. Okay, verse 17, a man on the housetop must not come down to get the things out of his house. 18, a man in the field must not go back to get his clothes. 19, woe to pregnant women and nursing mothers in those days. Verse 20, pray that your escape may not be in winter or on the Sabbath. Verse 21, for at that time there will be great tribulation, the kind that hasn't taken place from the beginning of the world until now and never will be again. Verse 22, unless those days were limited or shortened, no one would survive. But those days will be shortened or eliminated because of God's elect or his chosen ones. Okay, so what is Jesus saying here? When you are looking at Jerusalem and you see an image set up by this king over who's ruling a beastly kingdom, who has somehow made an agreement with Israel but broke his agreement and stopped a sacrifice on the Temple Mount, that's the sign. That's the sign of his coming. The sign of Jesus' coming is yet to appear. Get it? There's an interesting parallel there. Okay? So when you see it, run for the hills. Don't even take time to pack. This is going to be so sudden. Those with dependents or hampered by physical conditions are going to struggle. Winter, Jesus is saying, means inhospitable weather. It does get cold. It does rain. And it does snow in Israel. And those things, if you've ever seen snow in Jerusalem, it stops the city cold. Pun intended there.
Yeah, okay. I saw that.
Did you get that? You see what I was
did.
doing?
However, I was in Jerusalem one time, and it did snow, and it was in November, and it was 2 inches of snow. I thought, am I back in Minnesota?
Exactly. And everybody's freaking out because I can't go up these hills. Okay, so that's what he's saying. If it's winter time, it could be bad conditions and hamper your... And how are people going to get out of Jerusalem? They're going to drive. They may run. They can't take the transportation. Okay, that's what he's saying. So pray you have good weather. Pray it's not the Sabbath. Why? Because everybody is resting on the Sabbath. They've kind of settled in for the day. If this happens on the Sabbath, suddenly your mindset, your whole life is thrown into upheaval from dead stop. So you can't do that. Pray that that doesn't happen. And by the way, the Arabs tried to do this to Israel during Yom Kippur, where the whole country shuts down for 24 hours for this feast, the Day of Atonement. They tried to hit them in 73 on this day. Israel had to go from a dead stop to full war fitting in a matter of hours. It was amazing. And they still triumphed. So hooray, God's on their side. Okay. So Larry, the nature of this 3.5-year season is commonly called in the church today the Great Tribulation. Now, let's let this sink in. Did you hear what he said? This is going to be so bad and conditions are going to be so horrid around the world that no time like this has ever been up to that point, and it will never be again.
So you tell me it's going to be worse than the Holocaust or any of the wars that we have seen?
Okay, look at the other prophecies that are in the Bible, specifically the book of Revelation. It says at one point, things are so bad, a third of humanity is going to die. Let's not take that lightly. A third of humanity is going to die. At this point, that's a little over 2 billion people because of natural disasters, the upheaval. Let's put it this way. When a woman is about to give birth, those labor pains, those birth pangs, they come hard and they come fast. And up to that point, the wife could be uncomfortable, right? The woman could be in pain, okay? But man, like Bill Cosby said, when those labor pains hit his wife, she stood up in the stirrups. It is intense. I watched my wife give birth 4 times. Well, actually 3 times because one was, cesarean, out of view. But those 3 times that she gave birth, oh my gosh, the pain that she went through, the agony, the screaming that she went through. This is the birth pangs. Well, what happens if the whole world is in upheaval, both cosmically and geographically, geologically? Right now, we're seeing more earthquakes of a 7-point magnitude and above than we have in the previous century. They're ramping up. We're seeing more than 40 volcanoes blowing their tops right now than we've seen in decades prior to this.
And, when we talk about a current word that we hear oftentimes from politicians, globalization, that means that we're all going to be one community at some point. That means there's no borders, there's common language, common government, common finances, all of that. So when this happens, Jay, it's going to happen in such a way that it will affect everyone. You're not going to get away from it because you're all connected.
Exactly. Look at media, social media, for crying out loud. You see events that happen around the world in real time. Well, we're going to be able to see all of this real time. And imagine if you're seeing this happen, if you're caught in the middle of it, no wonder Jesus says, and men's hearts will fail for fear. People are going to be having heart attacks, freaking out because of this stuff happening. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it because that's what the prophecy says. Whatever you think of the Holocaust, whatever you think of genocides, whatever you think of natural disasters and tsunamis and all these things, this is the lead up to Jesus' return. These are the birth pains that are introducing and indicating his soon return. It's not the sign, but they are signs. So the nature of this 3.5-year season is going to be tough. That's why they call it the Great Tribulation. And Jesus says, and if these days weren't shortened, nobody's making it out alive. This is pretty sobering.
It is very sobering. It's just unimaginable.
Okay, so imagine that you're actually living in this and you're watching all this happen. Jesus says, and by the way, during this time period, some people are going to think it's global warming and not have a clue that it's Jesus approaching and approaching the end of human dominion on earth. And by the way, at this time, the spiritual counterfeits will be popping up all over the place. This is another one of the signs. Verse 23, if anybody tells you then that, look, here's the Messiah, or over there's the Messiah, Jesus says, don't believe it. Why? False prophets, false messiahs will arise. They're coming, folks. I mean, we've seen it. Jim Jones, right? The Heaven's Gate people, all sorts of people have risen up lately. I mean, they're not just claiming to be a Messiah. Many of them are claiming to be Jesus. And Jesus here says, don't believe them. And by the way, in the effort to make people believe them, Jesus is saying they'll even have the ability to do great signs and wonders, to lead astray, even if that were possible, Christians.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that our culture wants, and that is proof. And so a lie that has proof, false signs and wonders, is going to be a hard obstacle to overcome.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. And my wife and I have talked about this too. A lot of people say, oh, people aren't interested in God and they're not interested in Jesus because they're not interested in spiritual things. They just want to live their lives and have their Netflix and play Pokemon Go and all these things and get on with life and prosper, whatever. No, I beg to differ. You look around in society today, there are a whole bunch of people pursuing supernatural things. Within the church, they're asking God for signs, miracles, and wonders. And by the way, some of these signs, miracles, and wonders are fake. Some of them are genuine and fantastic because God's kingdom works that way. Some of them are distractions. You have to be discerning. What we talked about earlier, when we were having that cup of coffee last week, even in the occult realm, I've talked to people who've come out of the occult who have seen, for example, at a seance, there was a practice of having a cone, kind of like a megaphone, that would rise up off the table and float around the room, come in front of you and you'd hear a voice coming out of it. That transcends nature's laws. And the occult can do it. So if this is a false messiah and a false prophet, don't be surprised if they can do things that are miraculous. Jesus is saying, don't fall for it though. Why? I'll tell you why. In the Torah, God says, if somebody comes to you as a prophet and tells you and does these great signs and wonders, but then tells you to walk away from God, don't believe them. Just ignore them. He says they can't harm you. And so the same thing. Jesus is following the same Torah prescription. He's going, okay, so they do signs, miracles, and wonders. So what? If they tell you to walk away from Jesus or to not pursue the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they are false messiahs and false prophets.
Okay, so we've talked about this very dark time where it's just going to be absolute pandemonium around the world. So immediately after these days, however, there's some more that takes place.
Right. This is verse 29. Okay, look in your Bible there. It says right there, immediately after the tribulation of those days. So the lead up of this particular event that's going to happen is immediately after the tribulation. Those 3.5 years are the lead in. It says the sun will be darkened, the moon will not shed its light. Well, it makes sense because where does the moon get its light? From the sun. If the sun's dark, there's going to be nothing coming from the moon. The stars will fall from the sky and celestial powers will be shaken. That can literally mean debris. Maybe there's asteroids coming in, meteors, whatever it is, or it could be figurative. There could be celestial powers, in other words, spiritual forces that are around us that are also shaken, and their downfall is coming. Because remember, humanity rules earth. Satan is the prince of the power of the air. There's two dominions going, but when Messiah comes, he's claiming it all. So it's all falling at this point. And here it is. The time frame, according to our prophecy pattern, is immediately after the tribulation. The events are cosmic upheaval, either literal, figurative, or both. But here comes the answer to the disciples' last question. What is the sign of your coming? Verse 30. And then, get it? After the tribulation, you'll see this. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. Wait a minute. Who is this Son of Man? Sound familiar? Go back to Daniel. What's Daniel? Here's the God sitting on his throne, the Father, the Son of Man, Jesus, who calls himself, I'm the Son of Man. And when he stood before Caiaphas, Caiaphas said, are you the Son of God? He goes, yep, I'm also the Son of Man. You're going to see me coming with the clouds. And he's identifying himself with this divine human in Daniel. So right here, Jesus is saying it again. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. What's that? Coming in the clouds. Because Daniel talked about it. The Jews understood it, and Jesus is confirming it here. And then all the peoples of the earth will mourn. Why? It's just, you ever see that movie Independence Day?
I did. There's
Okay.
two of them, right?
Okay, the first one, when the initial attack takes place.
Right.
And Harvey White, I think his name is, I can't remember his last name, but he's the guy who's in the car right here. And he sees this flaming wall coming at him, and it kicks up a car, and it's heading right for his windshield. And he just looks at it and goes, oh, crap.
You sound just like him.
Thank you. And I'm just laughing because every time I read through this section, it's like, and all the people of the world will mourn. Why? Because they see what's coming and they can't get out of the way. Why? They see Jesus coming. Remember, Jesus said, don't fall for the false messiahs and the false prophets, even if they do signs, miracles, and wonders. Because Jesus says, oh, trust me, when I show up, you are not going to miss it. Everybody's going to see it, whether it's some sort of worldwide phenomena of the clouds, or you're going to see it on social networks. Who knows if they're still functioning at that point. So here it is. And they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Why is he coming? To set up God's kingdom that will never end. Verse 31, he's going to send out his angels with a loud trumpet, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. Larry, does that sound like anything you've heard about before?
Yeah, I think we've put a term to it called the rapture.
That's right. It's a created term to describe this event. Now, we're going to get into a discussion sometime in the program, because I got somebody who would love to come in and talk about this, and it would be neat to go back and forth. But the rapture is the point when, as Jesus is returning in the clouds, he collects his people and gets them out of the way. Why? He is about to execute judgment on the weeds. So he pulls up the wheat, he's pulling up the tares, and he's going to burn the tares, or those who oppose him. Okay, so what's happening is that it's a sifting process so that he doesn't judge both the good with the wicked. So it's separating it out. Okay.
And isn't there a parable that way?
Exactly.
And the end of that parable says, leave the good wheat with the bad wheat until the day of judgment.
Right. I mean, no farmer would sit there and go through his fields and try to pull up all these weeds, because tares in Israel is a weed that grows very close and looks very like wheat. And until it's fully mature, you can't tell the difference. So, yeah, we will not know who is of God and who is not of God for sure until right at the end. Okay, so let's keep going here. The Son of Man, Daniel 7, coming in the clouds. This is the sign. The sign of his coming is Jesus coming with the clouds with undeniable power and glory. The action, the event is collecting his people, accompanied by angels and a trumpet blast, and they're going to separate the righteous from the wicked and the fence sitters. By the way, there are going to be some fence sitters all the way up to the very end there. Which way are they going to fall? You got to shake the fence. That's kind of what the tribulation is about, is shaking the fence.
In other words, a testing.
Exactly. By the way, think of it this way too. When judgment came on the earth, Noah was lifted up from the earth in an ark. He was saved, the others were taken. So what's going to happen to God's elect? Those who are survived are going to be lifted up from the earth, and they'll be saved while the others are taken. So when Jesus, by the way, when he ascended to heaven 40 days after he was resurrected, all right, 10 days before Pentecost, it's funny because he gives them the Aaronic blessing. It's called the lifting up of the hands, and he blesses them. So he gives them the Lord bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you, right out of Numbers, okay? He all of a sudden gets wrapped in clouds and goes up into heaven. That's what Acts chapter 1 says. So the disciples are standing there watching him go. And I'm kind of thinking, were they going, whoa, dude, that's like the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. I mean, wow. Or are they going, okay, what was that? Okay, so while he was going, it says they were gazing into heaven, and suddenly two men in white clothes stood by them. Those would be angels. Verse 11, they said, Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking up into heaven? This Jesus, I have to use that accent because every biblical movie, doesn't matter if you're like whatever your nationality, your ethnicity is, you all have a British accent.
I
right?
don't, yeah, I know that.
So why do you stand here looking up into heaven? This Jesus who has been taken from you into heaven will come in the same way that you have seen him going into heaven. How did he go into heaven, Larry?
By the clouds.
How's he coming back?
In the clouds.
Just like the Son of Man in Daniel 7, just like he prophesies in the Olivet Discourse, just like Paul talks about in Thessalonians. They all know that the Messiah is the Son of Man, and he's going to return with clouds. Now, why is this important to know all this stuff? Because verse 32, and we'll talk about this some other time, learn the lesson, learn this parable from the fig tree. As soon as its branch becomes tender and sprouts leaves, you know that summer is near. And that's the point, Larry. Why did Jesus prophesy this stuff to his disciples? Not just the near-term disciples and the mid-term disciples, but the disciples like us who I think are at the end, because the signs are there, so that we're not caught off guard. So we're prepared. So we're encouraged to do what? To keep going, to be fruitful, to stay at work. Even though the whole world is in upheaval, what is Jesus saying? Occupy till I come. Keep living fruitful, productive lives. Be a witness for me. Don't give up. Learn my word. Live my word. Because there's coming a point when you won't be able to do it anymore. And by that time, it's too late for you to live anymore and for the people you're trying to reach.
There's a point of no return.
That's kind of what we're talking about down on Big Brain University there at the kiosk, is we're telling people, we're not only testifying to them as far as our words, but also in our actions by giving away free coffee, doing good things for them. That's what we need to be doing, is to be that witness, that evidence that Jesus is real and he's coming back.
And I think the days of Noah were days of a point of no return. It came to a point, the wickedness got so bad, God just said, enough.
Exactly.
And again, he will say, enough. Now, is there any significance to the whole idea? I know he's actually using the fig tree as, something that grows there in Israel, and he's using it as an example. But is there any significance symbolically to the fig tree?
Right. On one level, you can say, he's saying, when you see a tree come into leaf, you know that summer's coming, right? We all know this. Duh. But, great that you brought that up. In prophecy, you have to look at the pictures. And the fig tree often stands as a symbol of Israel, the people of Israel. Think of it in this terms. Israel was a thriving nation at the time of the Romans when Jesus is giving these instructions. But 70 years later, because of the rebellion, Rome comes in with its legions, wipes out the temple, wipes off the Temple Mount, kills tens of thousands of Jews, and deports many of them into the Roman Empire. So in a sense, the fig tree went to sleep. It was like winter. There wasn't there was still activity in the land. It was still a Jewish land. There were still Jews living there. But for all intents and purposes, the nation of Israel went to sleep like a tree in winter. Okay?
And then in 1948, it became spring.
It became spring. It started budding again. Well, what's happened since that time? Israel has grown. You look at Israel back in the early 1900s, it's a desolate wasteland. Oh, wait a minute. It was an abomination of the Romans coming in that desolated God's holy place, the land. And it remained desolate until God came back and brought his people back to the land, and it started prospering. You look at Tel Aviv in the early 1900s, sand dunes. Maybe a couple of shacks, and that's about it. You look at Tel Aviv today, it is a major metropolitan city that stretches for miles. Really, folks, I gotta tell you this. Israel is back in the land. Mm-hmm. Israel is prospering greatly. A lot of things that we enjoy in life, in computers, technology, medicine, research, all sorts of things are coming out. The fruit is coming from Israel. This is one of the major signs of the end. And so, folks, that's why, when Larry and I are talking about this, and when we're out at the kiosk, the coffee kiosk there, we're telling folks, this is a sign. You better take this stuff seriously and really ask God, are you real? Are we at the end of time? Because you do not want to be at that point of no return.
So as we bring this to a conclusion, my coffee is really lukewarm. So I got to go. I got to go get another the warm up.
Shot before I leave
but
here.
What do we do with all of this? At the end of the day, the bottom line is what?
The bottom line is that we have been encouraged, we have been warned ahead of time. We need to let Jesus talk about it. Go ahead and just read through the rest of this, Larry. Matthew 24 and 25. The parable of the house steward is what? Stay at work. The parable of the virgins. The point is, stay prepared. Stay ready. The parable of the talents, in other words, use what's been given to you. Stay productive. The parable of the sheep and goats. We've also heard it said Jesus says, you ministered to these, my brothers, these poor and homeless and clothless and all that. Okay? You've ministered to them, well, you've done it unto me. Well, think of it in this term too, is if it's his brothers, it could be Israel and the Jewish community. Either way, we're called to help the helpless. So we need to be at work helping the Jewish community in Israel and those who are in need. That's how we stay at work. And by the way, we're going to be judged on how we treat Israel and the Jewish people and the people around us. That will be a witness of whether we really belong to the Son of Man or not.
Well, I think we'll leave it there for today, but I am so encouraged. I am so encouraged. I just know that my future is secure in the Lord, and He's got that future certainly secure in Him.
The prophets of God were accurate when they spoke about the Messiah. They were accurate about his rejection by men and that he would be a man of sorrows. They were accurate when they said he bore the sins of many and became the Savior of the world. Thanks for joining us.
This is Jay, your Truth Barista. Thanks for listening to the Truth Barista podcast. The best way to find out when a new podcast drops is through RSS feed. Go to our website, look for the RSS button, press it, and then enter your email. You'll be notified when a new podcast drops. Thanks for listening.